There's a big argument going on behind your back, and you're not even part of it. There's noise where you are not standing, voices raised in rooms you never entered, opinions forming without your consent, stories growing mouths of their own, and somehow your name keeps appearing. In conversations you never agreed to join, they argue about your choices as if they were theirs to make. They question your intentions without ever asking your heart. They replay fragments of you and call them the whole truth. What's strange is the distance. You're not angry, you're not defensive, you're not even curious enough to interrupt the chaos because peace taught you discernment. Once this would have shaken you, pulled you into explanation, made you rehearse responses you would never get to deliver. You would have tried to correct every misunderstanding personally. But now you're somewhere else entirely, living quietly, choosing carefully, breathing without urgency, while they exhaust themselves, arguing over versions of you. Some defend you fiercely, some criticize with confidence, some project wounds you never caused, some relive old dynamics through you, and none of them notice. You're no longer available for debate. That's growth people don't recognize. When your absence becomes maturity, when your silence isn't weakness, but self respect, when you realize not every narrative deserves your participation, you didn't change to confuse them, you changed to survive, to stop bleeding for explanations, to stop proving goodness, to stop auditioning for understanding. In rooms that thrive on noise, the argument behind your back grows loud because your calm unsettles them. Your lack of reaction feels threatening to those who feed on response. Your boundaries feel like rejection to those used to access. They ask why you don't react, why you don't defend yourself, why you don't clear your name. They don't understand that peace doesn't negotiate with chaos anymore. You learned something quietly. Not everyone deserves clarity. Some people want conflict, not understanding. They don't want truth. They want control over the story. So you let them argue. You let them tire themselves out. You let assumptions collide and egos clash while you keep choosing your life without interruption. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care selectively now. You learned your energy is sacred, your silence intentional, your presence earned, not freely given anymore. Behind your back, the argument continues, but it no longer follows you home. It doesn't echo in your sleep. It doesn't live in your chest. Because you finally understood not every fight is yours. And the most powerful part is that you didn't walk away loudly. You didn't announce your exit. You simply outgrew the room and left them arguing with an old version of you, while you are already somewhere else, living, healing, unbothered, and at peace. Over time, the noise loses its shape. What once sounded sharp becomes distant, like thunder, far beyond the hills. You recognize it's there, but it no longer directs your steps or decides your pace. You start noticing how arguments need audiences, how conflict survives on reaction, how people grow louder when they realize you're not listening. Your absence become it's the loudest response. They keep revisiting the same points, recycling assumptions, retelling stories with new emotions, hoping something will finally provoke you. But growth has made you unreachable in ways silence never could. You're no longer explaining yourself because clarity doesn't require permission. You're no longer correcting lies because truth doesn't chase rumors. You're no longer defending your heart because those who matter already know it. What once felt unfair now feels revealing. You see who needs drama to feel relevant, who needs conflict to feel connected, who only knows how to bond through opposition and judgment, and you quietly step out of that pattern. There's freedom in not being present for conversations that reduce you, freedom in not being discussed accurately because accuracy was never the goal, control was, and you stopped handing that over. You learned that some people argue not because you hurt them, but because you healed, because your boundaries disrupted access, because your calm reflected their unrest. And they didn't know where to place that discomfort, so they placed it on you. In rooms you don't enter, in stories you don't edit, in arguments you don't attend. And strangely, life kept moving forward anyway. That realization changes something deep. You stop rehearsing defenses. You stop wondering what they think. You stop checking the temperature of spaces you've already left. Your focus returns to what's real. You build quietly relationships rooted in presence, days shaped by intention, moments that don't need commentary. You learn that peace isn't loud, but it's incredibly table. Sometimes someone brings you fragments, bits of what was said, who sided with whom, who criticized, who defended, and you listen without reaction, not because you're numb, but because you're whole. You don't need the room's approval to validate your direction. You don't need consensus to trust your growth. The argument behind your back eventually thins. People move on to newer stories, newer conflicts, newer targets, because chaos never stays satisfied. It just looks for the next mirror that reflects discomfort, and you remain unmoved, unhooked, unbothered, not because you won, but because you refused to play. That's the part they never see. How strength can look like absence, how maturity can feel like silence, how self respect doesn't announce itself. It simply chooses peace and keeps walking. So let them argue, let them assume, let them misunderstand. You are not required to show up where growth is unwelcome and peace is disruptive. You are busy living, busy healing, busy becoming, and that life quietly, powerfully speaks for you. Eventually, you stop measuring distance between who you were and who you are, because the gap no longer aches. It simply exists, like a road already traveled, with no reason to turn back. You realize how much energy debate consumes, how many lives are shaped by reaction, how many people stay stuck trying to win rooms that were never meant to hold them, and you feel grateful. You stepped out. What they call indifference is actually discernment. What they call silence is self-trust. What they call avoidance is wisdom learned through exhaustion. You didn't disappear, you redirected. There's a quiet confidence that grows when you stop narrating yourself, when you let actions speak without subtitles, without defense, without explanation. You trust time to do its work. You begin to notice something subtle. The people who truly know you never ask for clarification. They don't bring gossip as concern. They don't urge you to respond. They see the consistency, and that's enough. Others keep circling the same arguments because resolution was never the goal. They needed friction. They needed alignment through opposition. They needed something external to avoid their own reflection. And you were convenient once, but convenience ends. When access ends, when reactions stop arriving, when silence refuses to perform, they call it cold, because warmth no longer flows toward chaos, and that unsettles them. You learn that being talked about is not the same as being affected, that words lose power when they have nowhere to land. You don't internalize narratives built by people who never held your truth in their hands. Some days you feel compassion, not pity, just understanding. You see how loud conflict often masks emptiness, how arguments become substitutes for connection, how tearing others apart feels easier than sitting with oneself. And you let that compassion stay distant because empathy doesn't require proximity. You can wish people healing without reopening doors, without sacrificing your peace, without re entering rooms you outgrew. Life grows fuller in the quiet, not because nothing happens, but because what happens matters. You invest in presence, in relationships that don't need spectators, in conversations that don't travel beyond the room, in love that doesn't need defense. You notice how light your body feels when you stop carrying misunderstandings that were never yours to fix. How much energy returns when you stop proving yourself to people committed to misreading you. The argument behind your back becomes background noise, then distant weather, then nothing you track at all, because your life fills the space with purpose, with routine, with moments that don't require approval. And one day you realize they stopped talking about you, not because they understood, but because you no longer fed the story. You were never the subject, you were the fuel, and you quietly removed yourself. That's when peace fully arrives, not as relief, but as normal, as the baseline, as the way you live now, unexplained, unapologetic, grounded. You don't need closure from rooms you left. You close them by choosing yourself, by walking forward, by letting silence do what explanations never could, by trusting that your life is the only response required. And if they ever notice your absence, really notice it. They won't find you waiting. They won't find you watching. They'll find you living fully, freely, finally, untouched by arguments that were never yours to begin with. By now you move through days differently. Not faster, not louder, just steady. You don't scan rooms for whispers. You don't rehearse defenses before conversation. Your presence no longer hinges on permission. It exists without announcement. The arguments behind your back persist, but they are faint, like distant echoes. They ricochet in empty halls, and you don't follow the sound. You let it dissipate naturally. While you build quietly in the present, you notice freedom in detachment, freedom from needing validation, freedom from proving what is already true, freedom from correcting versions of yourself that others invented to suit their needs. You no longer hand them the pen. Some days, fragments reach you anyway, pieces of their stories tossed casually. You hear them, and